Brilliant. So, Jim, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you, Frank and Barry, for your kind invitation to come and share with you guys today. It's a real privilege and an honour to do that. I just want to open with a scripture, if that would be okay. And it's interesting, even some of the testimony we've heard this morning, I think this just speaks into that, and certainly in my journey, as that will progress, you'll hear more about that. But I want to read from Psalm 112 this morning. It says, "Praise the Lord. How joyful are those who fear the Lord and delight in obeying his commands. Their children will be successful everywhere. An entire generation of godly people will be blessed. They themselves will be wealthy, and their good deeds will last forever. Light shines in the darkness for the godly. They are generous, compassionate, and righteous. Good comes to those who lend money generously and conduct their business fairly. Such people will not be overcome by evil. Those who are righteous will be long remembered. They do not fear bad news. They confidently trust the Lord to care for them. They are confident and fearless and can face their foes triumphantly. They share freely and give generously to those in need. Their good deeds will be remembered forever. They will have influence and honor. The wicked will see this and be infuriated. They will grind their teeth in anger. They will slink away, their hopes thwarted." And it struck me about, the need to have reverence for God, to have confidence in God, and also to be obedient in God. And I hope through my testimony this morning that you'll really see how God can do amazing things when you're obedient. I always say that in my life, I've certainly seen that blessing follows obedience. So hopefully that'll be an encouragement to you. But in my background, like Frank, I was a police officer for 20 years in my home city of Aberdeen. And then I was 20 years in the oil industry in various management roles. My church background, I was taken to a Church of Scotland as a youngster, Sunday school, member of the Boys Brigade. I was now married a second time. My first marriage, I was married in church. My children, Natalie and Jack, were christened in church. And I went to church in my 30s, and the minister came to me one day and said, "Look, you always come to church every week. Have you ever thought about becoming a member of the church?" So I went to these classes for 6 weeks and became a member of the church. But it wasn't until I got together with my wife, Ashlyn, who came from a Brethren background. And she was the first person to ever challenge me about having a personal relationship with Jesus. And that was a real game changer for me. We were attending a church in Aberdeen, West Hill Episcopal Church, and they were running an Alpha course. And I suggested running an Alpha course. And 3 weeks into the 10-week course, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 4th of October, 2004, and I don't know the significance of all the fours, but I went upstairs to my bedroom and I prayed the prayer, lay down in my bed and prayed the prayer in the back of my Alpha book. And the amazing experience of the Holy Spirit, this tingling started at my feet and went right up my body, and I fell fast asleep. And when I woke up, I knew I had been changed. There was things that had happened in my life, and I was angry and frustrated about, and I describe it, it was like God put it in the drawer of a filing cabinet and pushed that drawer shut. And seriously, these things never came to my mind until further down the line, months down the line, I could think about these things without getting that feeling. So it was absolutely incredible. So it was really the start of an incredible journey for me. My first step in faith was in 2005. I'd been working for a company that involved a coaching and mentoring role. So I'd been in London working with one of the team. And I was sitting in a Friday night at the airport waiting to catch my flight back from London. And I was reading a book called Battlefield of the Minds by American pastor Joyce Meyer. And I'd been thinking about going to Iraq to train the Iraqi police. God had put in my heart this would be, an opportunity to be of use, to use the skills that I had from the police service, and he, lots going on in Iraq at that time. I thought, how amazing would that be to go and have an impact in that area of the world? And I was reading this book, and as I got a couple of chapters and started, turning the pages, there was big bold letters and it was jumping out at me. I just want to share with you. I've actually written that down, the various things that were coming to me from this book. So to be responsible is to respond to the opportunities that God has placed in front of us. For many are called, but few chosen. And then in big capital letters, get up and go. Behold, now is the favourable time. I encourage you to be a person who is not afraid of responsibility. In meeting resistance, you will build your strength. If you only do what is easy, you will always remain weak. If we do not use the gifts and talents that He has given us, then we are not being responsible over what He has entrusted to us. And again, in big capital letters, be prepared, use what you've been given. I encourage you to respond to the ability that God has placed in you by doing all that you can with it, so that when the Master returns, you can not only give Him what He has given you, but more besides. Set your mind to do what is in front of you and not turn from within, just because it's challenging. For this commandment, which I command you this day, is not too difficult for you, nor is it far off. I came home that night and said to my wife, Ashlyn, God has spoken to me through this book. I'm going to Iraq. So I just want to share a photograph and share my screen. 5 weeks later, I find myself in a British Army camp an hour south of Basra, just in the outskirts of a city called Al-Amara. So it's a picture of me. You don't recognise me, I'm back row, second from the right. So yeah, amazing times. Away for 9 weeks at a time and home for 3 weeks. So our responsibility was to train existing Iraqi police officers. And then accompanied by the army, we would go and visit various police stations in the Mazan province. And back in that time, 2005, still a lot going on. They'd be attacking the British camp, 2 or 3 times a week with rockets and mortars, and going into police stations would be petrol bombed and all that kind of thing. So really challenging kind of environment. But I remember the first time I drove out of the camp to go and visit a police station, and I just had this sense that I just said to myself, my faith in you will see me through. And He did. God protected me in many kind of difficult situations. And I love being back with former police officers, because you've got that connection, boys from all over the world, a lot of guys from ex-RUC, interestingly, but guys from New Zealand, Australia, and had an amazing time, and really felt that we did make a difference. As challenging it was, we were working with interpreters, so doing the training through that. And then when we went to the police stations, we would work with our corresponding colleagues. So if you had a traffic background, you work with traffic. My background was CID, so I worked with their serious crime and kidnappings and that kind of thing. So absolutely amazing, amazing experience. 2006, I've been blessed since I retired from the police. I've always been offered jobs, and that's what happened. A good friend that had an engineering company asked if we would come and do business development for him. So I started doing that role. But within a couple of years, I was getting restless. I felt God, was wanting me to be doing more for Him. But then 2008, sadly, the general manager of one of the sister companies had passed away with cancer. And my friend Jim asked, would you move across to be general manager of that company? So I stepped into that role, and to be honest, for the next year, I was so busy getting that company up to scratch that, that feeling had gone away. But slowly it crept back. And then the youth pastor at my church at that time knew I was unsettled, and he drew my attention to a job with Bethany Christian Trust. And we are headquartered in Edinburgh, and do a lot of work with homeless and addiction. And this was a job, North of Scotland Development Manager. So you would be covering Aberdeen, Inverness and Dundee. So I thought, okay, this is maybe the opportunity. So I applied for the job. Lo and behold, I was offered the job. And I thought, yeah, I'm willing to take it. You mean a 50% cut in salary, etc. And I thought, I'm willing to do this. But I went and spoke to my pastor. The word says to take counsel. And my pastor, Ian Ferguson, was good friends. We'd meet for a coffee. And I said, look, Ian, I've been unsettled. I've been offered this job. What do you think? He said, no. He says, no, that's not for you. And I thought, okay. So I declined the job offer, and I kept doing the general manager's job. And then May 2010 by this time, and I'm in my office in the south side of the city. Lunchtime, I'm on my laptop, and I'm putting in Christian this, Christian that. I'm looking, what is it I should be doing, Lord? And I came up on a website for Hillsong International Leadership College. And there was a worship stream, and I'd gotten involved in worship as becoming a Christian. And there was a pastoral care stream, fasting was heavily involved in that. And I thought, wow, I never thought at 50, going to be a student. And I thought, where is this college? And I find out it's in Sydney, Australia. So I thought, oh, okay. So I drove home. And when I walked in through the door that night, Ashlyn said, I was on your laptop at lunchtime. And I found this site for a college in Australia. It's called Hillsong. So I told her the story. I'd obviously found it at the same time. So we were in the city and having a coffee that weekend and speaking about it, because it's a massive decision. And I said to Ashlyn, look, I'm going to pray. So sitting in the coffee shop, I prayed. And at the end of that prayer, Ashlyn said, Lord, if we should go to Hillsong, show me a picture of a man called Sydney before the end of the day. Now I'm looking for smiles on your faces, because I certainly had a smile on my face when she said that. So we drove home, and Ashlyn called me through to the kitchen. And on the Saturday newspaper, there was a pull-out section with weddings. And here is a picture of a man called Sydney, even spelled Sydney. And this is a cut, and I've actually taken this. Ashlyn's got this cut out and stuck in the cover of our Bible. And I'm thinking, when's the last time ever I heard of a guy called Sydney? Never mind, see a picture of a guy on the very day that you've asked to be shown that. So we turned to each other and said, okay, Lord, we'll do this. So I went back to Pastor Ian Ferguson, and I said, we feel that we're being led to go to Hillsong. I didn't tell him any of that story, but I said, I feel that's where we've been led. And he said, yeah, that's what you should do. And then everything fell into place. Sold our cars. First guy came and saw my car, bought my car. We rented our house. The application to go to college was accepted very quickly. The student visa, I'd read that could take weeks or months. I submitted that on a Sunday afternoon. The Tuesday night, the approval came back. I mean, absolutely everything fell into place. So 2011, we come off a plane in Sydney to start a year as students, and had an amazing year. But just want to share three short stories of God's provision, God's protection, and God's healing over that year. So provision. So I'd given up the job. We're renting our house, which is covering the mortgage. I need to work to get an income in Australia. And the very first evening service at Hillsong, 3,500 people. I'm standing in the coffee queue, and it just guy standing next to me, and I just started having a conversation with him, as you do. Never thought any more about it. About 6-8 weeks later, we'd moved into this small garden flat, and there was some minor repairs needing doing. So the owner had said, I'll get somebody to come round and do that repair. So we had bought furniture from the girls that were in the flat previously. And there was a chest of drawers, you know, I'd seen better days. So I bought some paint, had it out on the patio, given it a paint. When the guy arrives to do the repairs, and as he walks around the corner, we recognise each other from the coffee queue 6 weeks before. And he sees me painting and he says, oh, you looking for work? I says, yeah. And he gave me work every Friday for the next year. Absolutely incredible. Protection. I'd gone from driving a nice car, a Jaguar that I had, to a 1998 Proton hatchback with 200,000 kilometers on the clock. There was a guy at Hillsong, Ray Lemon, he's head of maintenance. He sees it as his ministry to provide and service cars for students. So I had this Proton in the May, which is obviously the equivalent of their winter. I'd been doing a painting job, and 5 o'clock at night, it was dark, it was raining, and I came down to a junction and I had to cross 3 lanes to get to traffic lights to double back. So I crept out into the first lane, into the second lane, and thinking it was clear, I went to drive into the third lane. And next thing, I see this massive impact on the driver's door. And I'm aware the car's being pushed round, there's glass flying everywhere. And the car comes to a stop, and there's nothing left of the driver's window. And the whole car and me are completely covered in glass. That's small squares that it breaks into. So the guy that had hit me, a young guy, wrenched open the door, and I step out just wearing a short sleeve t-shirt, pair of shorts and flip-flops, and there is not a scratch on me. And just at the split second of impact, I felt something so tangible on my left shoulder, so tangible you would have actually turned around to see what it was, you know, go like that, as if they put their arms around me. And the guy was amazed. He says, you must be injured, you must be cut. He's looking at me front and back, not a scratch. And, you know, I'm totally convinced that God's protection on me in that accident. And then healing. Incredibly, Aisling had a heart attack out of the blue. Looking back, there have been things that were happening, building up to it, but there was always a reasonable explanation for it. And long story short, she was found to have 2 blockages in her arteries, one 100% block, one 95% block, signs of arterial disease. But unfortunately, the blockages were in the end of the artery, so they couldn't put stents in because they were scared they would burst the artery. So she went through about 10 days of recurrent pain on morphine, etc. And then they decided that they were going to try and relieve the blockages. Now at Hillsong, there were 14 extension services at that time. And as a student, you served at 2 services and then attended 1. So we served at an extension service at Burwood, and great friends with the pastor there, Steve Farr. And Steve was coming into the hospital, Westmeath Hospital, which is a cardiac hospital, to visit Aisling. When he bumped into me, I was nipping out to get a sandwich. And he said, look, let's go and have lunch together. And over the space of that half hour, to use a nosy expression, I was pumped. He spoke such confidence into me about the power of God to heal in any situation. I walked back into Aisling's room and I put my hand on her feet and prayed, and tangibly felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. And then over the weekend, you know, read Psalms over her, and we prayed, and she was going down for the second angiogram on the Monday morning. So Aisling's best friend, they'd had a business in Peterhead, half an hour north of Aberdeen. They'd sold it, had emigrated to Australia. They were in Perth. So our friend had flown over to Sydney that morning. So I'd gone and picked her up at the airport. We're about 10 minutes with Aisling before she went down to theatre, and I took her best friend down to the coffee shop, and actually had a chance to share my testimony because Pat, her friend, said, you know, if Aisling dies today, and you know, I had the opportunity to share my faith in God, and then I get a text from Aisling saying I'm back in my room, and I thought, wow, that's quick. So I went back into the room, and she's got a big smile on her face, and so she told me what had happened. So the guy had done the angiogram procedure and comes to Aisling and says, Aisling, I can't find any blockages. I'm going to do it again. So I did it a second time, no blockages. And then we got, you know, subsequently got the formal written report that said 2 blockages, signs of arterial disease, no blockages, no signs of arterial disease. Absolutely miracle of healing. And, you know, over the course of this year, God is constantly putting you in these challenging places to build your faith. And when you step out, you know, obeying him, there's a blessing that comes from that, as I say, and it continues to build your faith to a totally different level. So it was the end of that year. I'm praying, okay, Lord, you've clearly taken me out of business to take me to Australia. What do you want me to do next? And that's when he challenged me. He said, we've got church pastors, school pastors, street pastors. Why do we not have business pastors? And the second thing he said was, you get business pastors into business and I will do the rest. So it's one of these moments you think, why do we not have business pastors? I don't know. Or, yeah, why do we not have business pastors? It wasn't a term that I'd ever heard of in my corporate business world. And I started researching what was out there. I came upon Marketplace Chaplains USA that were massive, that had this model of proactively going into business. So I came home 2012 and I created a company, Business Pastors Limited, with the vision of having a male and female business pastor visiting the company a couple of times a week. To be a support to people in that corporate business environment. And I started speaking to some guys I knew in Aberdeen in different businesses, middle management, and they love the idea because they're the guys that are spinning all the plates. They're trying to do everything. They're trying to help staff if they can, etc. So here was someone willing to come in and help with that. But I was never getting to the decision-making level. And then my wife, Aisling, threw a spanner in the works in the April, and came to me one morning and said she'd been praying and the Lord told her to tell me to put this down for the time being. And that was really difficult because, you know, I was confirming there was a need. I felt that's what God had given me as a vision. But bearing in mind, you know, how God was speaking to us, and I thought, okay, so I did put it down and I got back into work. And in 2013, still with this passion, if you like, to bring some support to the business community, with encouragement of a Christian friend, I started running a breakfast in the city centre Holiday Inn Express, just in the main restaurant. And I thought, let's just give people a chance to come together. And then I can maybe be able to signpost them to help the need or whatever. So that started. And then I variously met 3 other Christian businessmen, all with a heart to do something. So in 2014, created a charity, the Business Connection, with a vision to encourage, equip and empower men and women working in professional business life, and a support to people of faith and none. So yeah, the breakfast continued to run, but at this point, you know, 2014, me, 3 other guys, were all in busy jobs, we're all working 50, 60 hours a week. So I knew something had to give. So in October that year, I was taking 10 days holiday to Lanzarote, and I said to the guys, I says, look, pray for me because I'm going to take this time to spend with God and find out what my next steps are, because something has to give if we're going to develop the business connection. So firstly, on the Thursday, we were flying out on the Saturday, and the Thursday, one of my devotionals said, I have a new seed for you. I thought, okay. On the Friday, Aisling Googles, where is the church in Lanzarote? and it transpires it's in our hotel. We fly out on the Saturday, go to church on the Sunday. Now, this church is led by a guy from Liverpool who'd been at a conference in England, wasn't sure if he would be back. So he'd organised for this lady from Somerset to come out and give a word. So bearing in mind, I had in my devotional, I have a new seed for you. She then stands up and speaks from Matthew in the parable of the sower, and how you've maybe planted a seed, but you haven't seen the shoots of it yet, but don't disturb the soil because God is doing a work. And at the end of the service, she goes round with a box with envelopes, and there was a scripture in an envelope. So you pick one, and I got Romans 12:2. It basically says, do not conform to the patterns of this world. So I shared with her coffee afterwards. I said, look, I've come out here seeking God, had this message about a seed, you've spoken about the parable of the sower, Romans 12:2, don't conform to the patterns of this world. So during the week, I then read 2 books, and first one was Boundaries, Henry Cloud, and here was Romans 12:2 in that book again. And then the second book was by Christine Kane, who heads up the A21 human trafficking organization. And again, Romans 12, but this time, verse 1, it says, you need to make a sacrifice for me. Verse 2, do not conform to the patterns of this world. So when I finished the book, I turned to Ash and I says, Ash, when I go home, I'm stepping out of full-time work. Okay. So we'll go back to church, and the pastor's there to give the message, but this lady's still there, and she stood up to lead prayers. And the very first words that came out of her mouth was, be anxious of nothing. So at coffee afterwards, I'm giving her an update. I says, look, Romans 12, blah, 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 I've made this decision. When I go home, I'm stepping out of full-time work. And she says, look, believe that as much as God's doing a work in you this week in Lanzarote, he's already at work in Aberdeen, putting in place everything that you need. And I thought, okay, so you hear that, but in the natural, you then think, okay, what's that going to look like? You know, what job am I going to get for 3 days that will free up 2 days to develop the business connection? So came home that weekend, go back to work on the Monday, and I came upon an article in a drilling magazine about human factors and accidents. And 2 former police colleagues had started a company called Matrix Risk Control back in 2008, taking our investigation experience from the police careers into the oil industry. So I sent this article to one of theirs and I said, look, Morvan, this is the event. He said, yeah, that's great, thank you. He says, look, let's catch up for lunch on Wednesday. So I meet them for on Wednesday, and I'm telling them about what I've been doing, etc. And I could see him and his co-director, Alan Smith, are there. And see the 2 sort of glancing at each other. And I turned around and said, would you come and work for us for 3 days a week? And that'll free up 2 days to develop the business connection. And I thought, wow, I says, you know, I was working for a Christian friend at that time. I said, look, guys, I says, I haven't even had this conversation with the boss. Let me speak to him and then we'll speak again. So I gave my boss 3 months notice, and then beginning of 2015, started in this 3 days a week with Matrix, and that freed up 2 days to develop the business connection. 2016, we formally launched the Business Connection as a charity, and we started running a monthly breakfast with a guest speaker, as well as the fortnightly Tuesday morning breakfast as well. And just to stay on the path of the Business Connection, in 2017, I went to the guys and said, look, we created the Business Connection to encourage, equip and empower. I said, we've been very good at the encouragement piece through the breakfast, being able to signpost people to help, etc. But it was clear from conversations that I've been having that we needed to do more about equipping and empowering Christians to be more confident in their faith within the workplace. You know, there was a guy in the oil industry came to breakfast. They had a faith room at their office. He says, oh, I see the Muslim guys going in there. He says, I've never been seen walking in there. And I thought, you know, if you weren't even willing to show your faith by walking into the faith room, you would never have a conversation with anyone. So that led to the development of what became Thrive Conference that we ran in Aberdeen for the first time in 2019. We had 80 people there. We had a number of Christian organisations involved. LICC, London Institute of Contemporary Christianity, Transform Work UK. We had a great guy, Ken Yankee from Global Advance in the States, as one of our keynote speakers. So that went very well and was well received. And we started planning to run Thrive 2020 in Aberdeen, and then the following weekend it would be in Edinburgh. But then obviously we got hit with COVID. So September 2020, we took Thrive Conference online, and we had 2,500 people engage online. Over this course of a week, we were running 1 hour lunchtime slots. I was blessed to interview Kate Forbes, who's the finance cabinet secretary for finance in the Scottish government. She's a Christian and very, very open about her faith within that area of politics. So I had an opportunity to interview her, which was fantastic. So really well received. So coming back to business pastors, it was the end of 2017. Three things came together all in one weekend, and I thought I need to step out of matrix risk control and back into business pastors. And I picked up my Bible on the Monday morning, and I said, Lord, give me a scripture that confirms this is you and not me. And he led me to the scripture in Matthew, and learn the lesson from the fig tree. When you see the green buds, you know that summer's round the corner. And I thought, okay, that's confirmation. So I phoned my boss that morning, 9 o'clock. I said, Alan, I'm leaving Matrix. I'm stepping back into business pastors. And the guys knew all about my faith, all about my vision. So I left with their blessing. So 2018, stepped into business pastors full time. Now, that was a real interesting year. My marketing of business pastors, never shying away from our Christian faith in a conversation, but I was just using simple dictionary definitions. So business was your job, profession, vocation. Pastor, somebody who shepherds, supports, cares, and encourages. But the term pastor in a secular business world was becoming a barrier to engagement. There was this immediate connection to religion, to church, etc. And it came to a head in October of that year. I did a qualification many years ago that gives me membership of the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. So if you work in an HR role, you will be a member of the CIPD. And I was asked to come and speak at a local branch meeting. And there was 30 HR people in the room. So I did my business pastor's presentation, and I was using a tool. They could answer a question on their phone, and you would see the result of the vote on the screen. So at the end of the presentation, I said, I've got one more question to ask. What is the better company name? Is it Business Pastors, or not knowing what it was at the time, I said City Business Care. And it was 75-25% to City Business Care. So that was a confirmation, that the name had to change. And basically, about a week later, I was asked to share my testimony at a meeting of the Scottish branch of the International Christian Chamber of Commerce. And we went to this guy's house in the outskirts of Dundee, about an hour south of Aberdeen. Guy Derek Gaston that had his own company. And I shared my testimony, including the need for this name change. And he said, look, I totally get what you're trying to do. He says, come to my office next week for a coffee. So I went to his office and spent a couple of hours with him, and we were speaking it over and prayed together. And he says, look, you need to pray and write down all the words that the Lord gives you, and the name will come from that. I thought, okay. So that night I came home, I went out for a walk, and I'm having this conversation with God, and I says, God, what should this name be? What should we do? We provide personal proactive care to people. And I thought, it's 3 Ps. And the Holy Spirit says, no, it's P3. And I said, what do you mean P3? He said, Proverbs 3. And I kept getting all these words with the letter P: protection, provision, partner, partnership. So when I came home, as Derek said, I wrote them all down, and I went to my Bible, and NIV, the heading of Proverbs 3 says, wisdom bestows well-being. And I thought, okay, it's P3 business care. But from a secular perspective, P3 meant that we provided personal and proactive care to employees working in partnership with the employer. Now, interestingly, I've been speaking to an organisation in Aberdeen as business pastors, done a presentation and went back into thought with the CEO. And I said, look, give me some feedback. And he says, well, some folk don't like the name business pastors. They're asking if you have to be a Christian to get the support. And I says, well, actually, we've rebranded. We're P3 Business Care. Oh, I like that. That's good type thing. So by this point, I changed the status of the company to become a social enterprise and community interest company. So as a social enterprise, you earn your income from trade. So we tick that box because we charge a monthly fee to a company for support of their business partners, which then allows me to remunerate business partners for their time. But you also have what's called an asset lock, which means that any profits that you generate must stay within the social enterprise. So I love that model, because I thought we might get to that point where we could maybe subsidize a smaller company or pay for counseling for an employee, whatever. So I said to the CEO, I said, look, I knew the value of getting a testimony. And I says, what if we run a free pilot for 3 months? He says, okay. I says, that's much appreciated. He says, but I think we'll need to run it for 6 months to get the engagement with the staff. So January 2019, myself always planned to do the first pilot to get the experience. And another lovely lady, Jeanette Mackay, started twice weekly visit to this organisation called SCARF. They're a social enterprise working in fuel poverty, 60 staff. So we were visiting the Tuesday and the Thursday. And on the second visit, a female comes to Jeanette and says, could I speak to you about something? And within 6 weeks, the CEO was back to me saying, I can't believe the engagement you're having with the staff. I said, well, this is why I created P3. I said, because this opportunity has never been there for people working at 9 to 5 space to have someone they could speak to in confidence. So the pilot went very well. He put a questionnaire out to the staff. There was great feedback. Some people had used it, had their own peer network, which was fine. Other people hadn't used this, but thought a lot of the company for having that support in place if they needed it. Others had used it and gave us very good feedback on that. Back in 2015, I got a call from a lovely guy, C.G. Macklin, who's president of International Services for Marketplace Chaplains USA, completely out of the blue. And he said, I'm in London, I'd like to come and meet you. So him and his wife arrived in Aberdeen and we had them to the house for dinner. And he told me the story about Marketplace Chaplains USA. Now, today, they're in every state in the US. They're expanding into Canada. They've got 1,900 Marketplace Chaplains. They've got an income as a non-profit of in excess of $20 million a year. It's a massive operation. He shared with me that back in 2007, they had tried to make a breakthrough in the UK. He said, but the mistake that we made was we employed a minister rather than a Christian businessman. And I said, yeah, I totally get it. I says, chaplaincy is a great work. And I'm on the AOG chaplaincy, head of AOG chaplaincy for the UK, for business. But that tends to be ordained ministers supported by volunteers. P3 business pastors or business partners are people with business experience. And you need to get the credibility. When you go into, a company and you're starting to do the induction meetings and people say, okay, what's your background? And you're giving them a business background, they know right away that you know the challenges that they are having. You get that credibility. The only company that Marketplace supported in the UK was a manufacturing business in Glenrothes, a couple of hours south of Aberdeen, called CourseTech. They had 90 staff. So the conversation developed, would P3 take on the care for CourseTech that would allow Marketplace to close down their UK operation because their focus was on Canada and North America. So we started the care for CourseTech. Then another door opened to Cardiff with 160 staff, a company called Bergstrom Europe, manufacture specialist AC equipment. A door is opened to Poole, a company called Europlacer, through one of the directors that is on the board of ICCC. He's on the board of Europlacer. And then another door opened to Sheffield, a lovely guy, Matthew Gavins. He's a Christian. He has a company, Evolution Power Tools, 60 million turnover business that he started in his dad's garage, repairing neighbours' tools. So they've got 60 staff. And then most recently, an opportunity in Aberdeen with a drilling company called Bore Drilling. So that's basically where we're at. I mentioned AOG. My pastor, I go to King's Church in Aberdeen. It's an AOG church. We've over 1,000 people now in church, adults and children. Ian Duthie was a GP by profession and a police surgeon. And he came to me a few years ago and said, do you think it would be helpful to have ministerial status with what you're doing, both with the business connection and with P3? And I said, yes, it would. Tell you a quick story about that. Church of Scotland minister that was very supportive of what I was doing said I could get you 10 minutes at a presbytery meeting to share about business pastors, as it was. So I said, that's great. So he messaged me and he said, look, there's a meeting on Tuesday night. 10 minutes, okay, this is fine. So I turned up at this church and rather naively thinking it might be a dozen Church of Scotland pastors in a room, I'd share for 10 minutes, Q&A, and then I'd be out. This was a full-blown presbytery meeting. And I walked in and there was all these folders with previous minutes of the previous meetings. There was over 100 people there. There was a table on the platform, door open, moderator, and everybody stood up. And here's item 9 on the agenda, Jim Grimmer. So I shared for 10 minutes. And this pastor got up from the back up to the front and said, you need to be an ordained minister to be a chaplain. And I said, well, I'm sorry. I said, I disagree with you. And I shared that story about Marketplace Chaplains USA. I says, the mistake they felt they made was employing a minister rather than a Christian businessman. And I said, that I was a street pastor in Aberdeen for 2 years, 2009 and 10, before going to Hillsong. I says, look at street pastors. How many people are street pastors and ordained ministers? Very few. But God's put on their heart to serve their community in that role. So I said, so I'm sorry, I disagree. But when Ian Duthie had that conversation and I shared that story with him, I thought, yeah, okay, that would get us over that obstacle, if you like, for any ministers or pastors that are of that mindset. Plus, it brings me under the oversight, if you like, of AOG, and Ian Duthie is one of those that I am accountable for the work that I do in P3. So yeah, probably about 6 months ago now, I was asked to join the Zoom call. Kirk McAteer, who heads up the missions and is on the national leadership team of AOG, had 6 other people on that call. And he says, you guys are all involved in different areas of chaplaincy. There's, healthcare, prisons, military, sport, education, emergency services, B for business. Would you be the business lead for AOG GB for chaplaincy? He says, you might want to take time to pray about it. And I says, no. I said, I don't need to pray about that. This is an answer to prayer. I've been praying that God would open the door to make connections to pastors, because I'm convinced there is people sitting in our churches that have come from that business background, that are retired, semi-retired, have got the time, would love to go back into that business environment. You know, as I say, chaplaincy doing a lot of great work in the retail, but that's not where I've been. My experience has been in the private sector, corporate business world. And there's people in our churches that have businesses would probably be open to a conversation about, you know, having P3 support to their employees. But it's just on 2 minutes to 9. So if it's okay with you guys, I've got a very short video. It's about 3 minutes, just over 3 minutes to share, which is a testimony from our latest P3 client, Ward Drilling. Darren Sutherland is a Christian. He got in contact with me with a view to when the staff started coming back into the office, and everything has happened from there. But I think this is, you watch this, and a really powerful testimony about the impact that we can have in the workplace.
There's a bit of a gap when it comes to caring for especially office staff, and the concept of P3 and where you brought the company is what attracted me to look for you guys post-COVID. With so many changes in the world, but also in the workplace. And one of the things for me that became very apparent during the COVID situation was the mental health aspect and how prevalent it was across quite a wide population of people. It wasn't very specific. A lot of people had struggles. I think being away from their workmates and being closed in for such a long time has had a significant impact on the employees and their well-being, and it's something that I felt we needed to address as a company, and was supported from top management to do so. That's why we reached out to you guys. Yeah, so the plan was to kick off a 3-month program to see how it would be received by the employees, and also to get feedback from you guys on whether we were having an impact. And I think it's been clear that, number one, it's been very well received by the employees. A lot of people do comment that they look forward to the visits on a Monday or Wednesday when they have Howard and Jeanette attend their office. You can sense that there's a nice atmosphere about the place, and they've integrated well. And I think what we're seeing at a high level, the results are having an impact. I've had several employees compliment on the quality of care, but it's not just the care, but it's the friendship, it's the walk journey with the employees. Where people have things going on in their lives that you just never know about when you're at work. And the nice thing about the P3 care program is that people are actually encouraged to speak about their problems and to seek help where necessary. And that's been a really key aspect for me.
Well, as somebody who has issues of addiction and gambling within my family, the day Jeanette turned up at my desk was a lifesaver for me. I tended to bury my head in the sand up until she came along, but now I feel I'm actually doing something about the problems within the family, and my close family member is now seeking treatment for addiction, and we're going to counselling, both myself, my close family member, and a couple of other close members of the family. So rather than just hiding away the problem, now we're actually beginning to try to do something about it, and that's been a great help. Quite frankly, I think she's taken a lot of the stress of keeping this such a secret away from me, and I find it a bit easier now to cope with day-to-day pressures of work, and I think it's been very positive.
Yeah, that lady shared that testimony. She couldn't tell her husband, she couldn't tell her best friend, but yet when Jeanette came to her desk one day, she felt that this was somebody I could speak to. So really powerful. Still here?